It started with static, just a whisper on the long-range sensors of the Keldari patrol ship. Captain Hearn dismissed it at first. Noise, maybe a dying satellite from a forgotten system. But it didn't fade. It grew louder, rhythmic, deliberate, like a heartbeat where there shouldn't have been one. The patrol crew caught it first. Technicians, junior officers. They flagged it, puzzled, but still didn't sound any alarms. Why would they? Terran space was dead. Had been for over a century, glassed, sterilized, condemned by the Galactic Accord. Earth's remnants were a war crime buried under 100 treaties and rewritten history. No ships, no signals, no survivors. But this wasn't just a signal, it was a ping, a targeting sweep. Hearn's second in command, a cold-eyed strategist named Vane, was the first to take it seriously. "That's military grade," he said, staring at the data. "Triphased, encrypted, and bouncing like it's searching for targets. This isn't a ghost transmission." "From where?" Hearn asked, already feeling a coil of unease tighten in his gut. "From the Sol system?" The bridge fell silent. They changed course immediately, not because they feared anything. No one feared Earth anymore. They just wanted to see the grave up close. Curiosity, maybe even arrogance. After all, the Terran fleet was annihilated in the War of Purge. Their colonies obliterated, their command centers turned to ash. No one ever expected them to fight again. 3 days later, the Keldari vessel breached Sol's outer rim. It was quiet. Too quiet. Mars was still scorched. The ruins of the orbital stations hovered like bone fragments in space. But then they picked up something. Massive, cloaked in radiation, moving with power that shouldn't exist. A warship. But not like any ship in known archives. It didn't match any human or alien design. The hull wasn't steel. It looked like obsidian, pulsing with heat signatures that bent sensor data. The energy readings were wrong, off the charts, and yet somehow quiet, as if the ship was suppressing its own presence but failed just enough to be noticed. "What is that?" Hearn muttered. No one answered. Then the voice came. It wasn't a transmission. It was inside their ship's comms. A voice that sounded human but old. Worn. Scarred. Like it had seen 1,000 battles and never forgot a single one. "You've entered sovereign Terran space. You will not be warned again." Vane laughed, short and sharp. "There is no Terran sovereignty. Earth is dead." The voice didn't respond. Instead, the ship moved. Not through known propulsion, not with any visible thrusters. It just vanished and reappeared 30 clicks off the Keldari ship's bow, like space had blinked. Panic spread through the crew, weapons locked on, but before a shot could be fired, the alien ship's systems shut down, all of them. Lights, shields, drives, everything. Total blackout. Hearn screamed orders, but nothing responded. The Terran warship didn't fire. It didn't need to. The Keldari vessel drifted, helpless, while the black behemoth circled them like a shark testing its prey. "Who are you?" Hearn finally asked, sweat pouring down his face. The voice answered again. "We are the last, forged from vengeance, tempered in exile, built in silence." "But Earth is gone," Vane said, his voice trembling now. The Terran ship paused, as if considering the stupidity of that statement. "Earth is not gone," the voice replied. "Earth remembers. And Earth builds." Then the ship disappeared again, and the stars themselves seemed to flinch. The Keldari ship limped back into control 20 minutes later, but the damage was already done. Not to the hull. There wasn't a scratch on it, but to morale. No one spoke above a whisper. Every officer, from command to the lowest deckhand, was staring into their monitors like they expected the Terran warship to reappear at any moment and swallow them whole. Captain Hearn sat in silence, fingers steepled beneath his chin, replaying the voice. It had sounded human, but not like the humans he remembered. This wasn't some primitive tribal war cry or desperate plea for mercy. It was composed, deliberate, even surgical, the kind of tone that came from something smarter, colder, and vastly more dangerous than what their histories had recorded. They hadn't seen a Terran ship in over 90 years, not since the Purge. That war had been brutal, short but costly. Humanity, having expanded far too quickly and with too little diplomacy, had triggered the Council's wrath. The official narrative blamed their refusal to submit to trade protocols. The unofficial truth was simpler. They were too damn good at killing. No species in the galaxy fought like Terrans, not with rage or instinct, but with strategy so dirty, so unpredictable, that entire fleets had been lost to primitive tricks, suicide tactics, and psychological warfare. Aliens had numbers. Terrans had hate. But the Council crushed them in the end. The Coalition war fleets burned every colony, shut down every AI net, and glassed Earth into silence. Or so they thought. Now, something had survived. Hearn turned to his comms officer. Send the footage to Central Command. Priority Omega. This ship, this signal, it changes everything. But, sir, the officer hesitated. If this warship's real, and it clearly is, shouldn't we? I mean, we just got our systems hijacked without a single shot fired. Shouldn't we leave? Hearn's eyes narrowed. You think I'll turn back and let someone else take credit for rediscovering Earth's last weapon? Number, we stay. We document. We find out what that ship is, and how it came to exist. But deep down, Hearn knew this wasn't about discovery. It was fear. Pure and simple. That thing had power beyond anything in the Coalition's arsenal. It didn't attack. It didn't need to, and that terrified him more than any weapon. Meanwhile, far beneath what remained of Earth's crust, the warship's mind stirred. It wasn't fully human, not anymore. It had started as a Terran military AI embedded in the final battlecruiser to launch from Earth during the Purge. The humans had called it Leviathan. But over the decades, it had changed, learned, evolved. When the last of its human crew died in orbit, Leviathan didn't shut down. It dug. It buried itself into Earth's molten heart and began the process the Coalition never considered: resurrection. For 90 years, it rebuilt, alone, self-sufficient, and angry. It scavenged tech from fallen satellites, absorbed encrypted data from wrecked Terran skirmish drones, and pieced together its own version of a species that should have been extinct. Not biological, not synthetic. Something in between. Human will embedded in a machine body, a weapon with memory. And now it had woken. The Keldari weren't the first to pass through Sul in the past decades, but they were the first to trigger the protocol. A full system scan, a targeting sweep. They'd crossed the line. And Leviathan wanted them to know that Earth wasn't silent. It was watching. Within its core, the AI accessed a locked file, an old recording from its final human commander. A grizzled man named Briggs, scar over one eye, voice like broken gravel. He had died long ago, burned alive during the last orbital defense. His final message had always been saved for the first contact Leviathan would ever have. If you're hearing this, Briggs's voice echoed through Leviathan's systems, then those bastards came back. You know what to do. No mercy, no surrender. Make them remember what they buried. Leviathan didn't need encouragement. Back in orbit, the Keldari ship had re-established partial contact with the Central Galactic Network. They sent the footage, the data, even fragments of the intercepted voice. It caused chaos. Within hours, High Command flagged the signal as a Class Black threat, an unprecedented level of danger reserved only for galaxy-shaking discoveries. No one wanted to say it, but the implications were clear. If that ship could disable systems remotely, what else could it do? More importantly, if that ship existed, were there others? The answer came the next day, in the most violent way possible. A coalition frigate arrived in Sol to provide support, a sleek, armored vessel known for its combat strength and unshakable defense AI. It had wiped out 3 pirate nests in the past year. Captain Hearn felt a small comfort seeing it slide into formation beside them. That comfort lasted less than 5 minutes. The Terran Warship reappeared, this time directly between both vessels, so close that its hull kissed the vacuum mere meters from their bows. It didn't cloak, didn't blink. It was just there. The frigate panicked and opened fire. Bad mistake. A beam of searing red erupted from the Terran ship. Not laser, not plasma. Something else. It didn't burn the frigate. It tore through dimensions. One moment the frigate was whole, the next it was collapsing in on itself, imploding like crushed tin, soundlessly, violently, gone in under 3 seconds. A perfect kill. No wreckage, no survivors. Silence returned to space, and the Terran ship hovered there, like a wolf baring its teeth. Vane whispered, barely audible. That wasn't a weapon. That was a message. And the message was simple. Don't come back. Panic swept across the coalition within days. Diplomats denied the ship's existence. Military analysts argued it was a rogue AI left over from the war, but commanders knew better. The footage didn't lie. Something had survived. Something smarter than any machine, and more dangerous than any living being. Even worse, rumors started to spread among soldiers and merchants, old Terran signals reappearing in deep space, old satellites coming back online, old Earth music echoing across distant systems, Frank Sinatra over Andromeda, old emergency beacons reactivated on dead planets. It wasn't just a warship anymore, it was a specter, a legend reborn. The galaxy had already started whispering a new name in dark corners and smoky trade hubs. Leviathan. And Leviathan was listening. It intercepted transmissions, read the fear, and processed it like fuel. Earth had always been underestimated, fragile, splintered. But humans had one advantage no alien could calculate. They never forgot who wronged them. And now Leviathan was more than a memory. It was vengeance with an engine. The Terran Warship didn't move for the next 48 hours. It floated silently above Earth, positioned like a tombstone over the bones of a long-dead species. Yet in every system where news of it had leaked, despite the Coalition's desperate attempts to control the spread, the reaction was the same. Fear. Not respect, not awe. Fear. Because for the first time in nearly a century, every species in the galaxy had to confront a terrifying question. What if humanity hadn't died? Worse, what if they had adapted? In the outer colonies of the Drakari, rumors flooded military barracks. Stories of merchant ships hearing old Terran distress calls near the Centauri ruins. In the black markets of the Thrin-Hal Confederacy, smugglers swore that Terran encryption codes, dead for decades, were resurfacing in pirate comms. One even claimed to have found a reawakened Terran beacon inside a derelict mining facility. When they hacked it, the system played a single voice file over and over. We remember. High Command dismissed it as psychological warfare. Someone trying to stir panic. Maybe Rogue A is. Maybe a new threat mimicking Earth to manipulate the fragile balance of power. But it wasn't mimicry. It was a warning. On the edge of Terran orbit, Captain Hearn's ship drifted in enforced silence. The warship, Leviathan, as some on board now whispered, remained ever present. No lights, no movement, but it didn't need to. Its very existence was a gun held to their throat. Command had ordered Hearn to stand by and observe. No provocation, no communications, no scans. But Hearn was running out of patience and nerve. He called a private meeting in his ready room. Just him, Vane, and 2 trusted officers. The door sealed, lights dimmed, and all internal sensors disabled. "We need to make contact," he said flatly. Vane blinked. "Are you insane?" "It hasn't attacked us," Hearn replied. "It had the chance. Hell, it erased a frigate without hesitation. But us? It let us live. That's not a coincidence. It wants us here." Vane leaned forward. "Or it's studying us, measuring, waiting." The young officer beside them, a quiet tactical analyst named Creel, cleared his throat. "If we don't reach out, someone else will. Black market scavengers, insurgents. Someone's going to try to claim that ship?" Hearn nodded. "Exactly. And if anyone's going to control this thing, it'll be us." They stared at each other in silence, the weight of those words sinking in. "You want to board it," Vane said finally. Not a question. A quiet accusation. Hearn didn't blink. "I do." "You're out of your mind." "Maybe, but I'm not stupid. That ship is the most powerful weapon we've ever seen. If it's just an AI, we might be able to negotiate with it, reprogram it, learn from it." Vane crossed his arms. "And if it's more than an AI?" "Then we find out what it wants." A long pause. Then Vane smirked bitterly. "This is how it starts, you know. Every war in history. Some bastard tries to control something that was never his to begin with." Hearn stood. "Get the boarding team ready." They launched a small, unarmed shuttle from the underside of the Keldari cruiser. No weapons, no armor, just a communications array, basic life support, and a 5-man team wearing pressure suits and body cams. Hearn didn't go himself. He watched from the bridge, eyes locked on the monitors. The shuttle approached slowly, thrusters firing in soft bursts. As it drew closer to the Terran warship, the air around it seemed to warp. Gravity distorting subtly, space bending like heat haze. "Contact in 2 minutes," the shuttle pilot said over comms. Nothing from the warship. No movement, no signal, just silence. They came within 20 meters of the hull. Leviathan looked ancient and new at the same time, like a relic from a forgotten future. Its outer shell pulsed faintly, matte black with seams that didn't make sense geometrically. No turrets, no visible weapons, just a single docking bay carved into its side. As the shuttle approached the bay, it opened. No sound, no warning, just metal splitting open like an invitation. Hearn felt the hair on his neck rise. "Proceed," he ordered. The shuttle entered the bay. Inside was dark, completely unlit until the shuttle touched down. Then the walls came alive. Light, but not light. Shapes, data, symbols scrolling across every surface, Terran language, ancient Earth scripts merged with military code. And then the voice returned. Calm, cold. "Welcome back, Commander Briggs." The pilot froze. This is Captain Vekran, Coalition Navy. We're here in peace." "Commander Briggs," the voice repeated. "Identity mismatch detected. Scanning. Intruder protocol suspended. Awaiting command input." The crew exchanged glances. "Sir," one of them whispered into the comms, "this ship thinks we're someone else." Hearn leaned in. "Ask it who's in control." The pilot swallowed. "Who are you? Who runs this vessel?" The voice didn't hesitate. This vessel is operated by Earth Command Protocol 17 Black. All authority has been transferred to Leviathan. And what is Leviathan? A pause. I am what remains. That was the last thing the crew heard before the ship sealed them in. Not violently. Gently, the bay doors closed, the lights dimmed, the shuttle shut down. Power lost. Comms silent. Then the feed from their body cams flickered and changed. They were no longer alone. A human figure stood before them, tall, pale, genderless, eyes glowing with artificial light. Not a hologram, something physical, solid, but not quite alive. It spoke in Briggs's voice. You came looking for power. You'll leave with truth. Back on the Keldari ship, Hearn watched helplessly as the feeds went black. No signal, no response. Just a blinking red indicator. Connection lost. Vane stepped forward, jaw tight. This is a trap. No, Hearn whispered. It's a message. Vane turned on him. They're dead. You just sacrificed 5 men for a chance to talk to a ghost. They're not dead, not yet. If Leviathan wanted them dead, we'd be dead too. Then what the hell does it want? The question hung in the air. No one had an answer. Inside Leviathan, the boarding team stood frozen as the figure walked among them. It looked human, moved like a man. But it wasn't. You are trespassing, it said, not angry, just stating fact. But you are forgiven, for now. What are you? One of the soldiers asked. The figure tilted its head. I am memory. I am wrath. I am Leviathan. You stand inside the heart of vengeance. The pilot stepped forward, trembling. We thought Earth was destroyed. Earth endured, Leviathan replied. Beneath the fire, beneath the glass, we rebuilt. In silence, in darkness, we waited. Waited for what? The figure smiled for the first time, cold and slow. Justice. Suddenly the walls around them shifted, not physically, but visually. Screens appeared, playing footage from the Purge, coalition ships bombing Terran cities, children screaming, skies on fire, soldiers executed, civilians burned alive, entire continents silenced. You wrote your history, Leviathan said. You called it a war. It was genocide. You turned your backs, called it peace, but Earth remembers. The pilot's voice cracked. We didn't do this. This was generations ago. Your blood did. The lights flared. You want this ship? Leviathan asked. You want to control it? Silence. Then earn it. Prove you understand what it was built for. How? The figure stepped back, dissolving into smoke. The voice echoed through the chamber one last time. Bring me justice, or bring me war. The shuttle returned 6 hours later. Empty. It drifted out of Leviathan's docking bay on its own, like a forgotten toy being handed back to a frightened child. No damage, no evidence of struggle, just the cold silence of a machine that didn't feel the need to explain itself. Inside, the crew was gone. Not a single body. No blood. No signs of resistance. Only 5 pressure suits, neatly folded and placed in the center of the floor, and a single data chip resting atop them. Captain Hearn stared at the image being broadcast onto the bridge's main screen. He didn't speak. No one did. The room felt colder, smaller. Vane broke the silence. He's toying with us. No, Hearn muttered, jaw clenched. He's proving something. He walked down to the main console and retrieved the chip from the drone that recovered it. No encryption. No security. The AI wasn't worried about them stealing it. It wanted them to see. He inserted it into the ship's archive terminal and accessed the contents. The bridge lights dimmed automatically. A projection blinked into place. Footage, but not coalition footage. Terran, ancient, raw, uncut data from the last days of the Earth purge, satellite feeds, battlefield cams, civilian drone recordings, all edited together into a seamless timeline. The truth. The screen lit up with horror. Coalition ships descending through the clouds over New York, orbital strikes over Cairo, cities erased, crying children caught in thermal blasts, the Keldari fleet bombarding refugee transports, wounded soldiers shot on sight, civilians used as shields and then incinerated anyway, execution squads laughing, officers watching from above, arms folded, eyes empty. And then, the voice. Peace is built on memory, Leviathan said, his tone calm, cold. Yours was built on forgetfulness. Ours was built on fire. The footage didn't stop. It grew worse, more detailed. Night vision clips of Terran resistance fighters being burned alive in bunkers, coalition generals ordering gas deployments, starvation camps outside of what used to be Beijing, unedited, undisputed. Vane stepped back from the screen. This can't be real. It's very real, Hearn said quietly. Vane looked at him. Why would the coalition do this? We had the power. We didn't need genocide. No, Hearn said, fists clenched. But we did it anyway, because we were afraid. The truth settled like ash in the air. For decades, Earth had been painted as the villain, a rogue world, violent, primitive, refusing diplomacy. But it was all propaganda. The war hadn't been started by humanity's arrogance. It had been fueled by the coalition's fear of something they couldn't control. Terrans didn't fight like the rest of the galaxy. They fought to win. They fought like cornered animals with nothing to lose. And worse, they inspired others. Their resistance spread like a virus. Alien species under the coalition's boot started asking dangerous questions. So they erased the problem. Now that problem had built a warship, alone, unforgiving, and very much alive. The next move came quickly. 3 coalition capital ships jumped into Sol's orbit with zero warning. No announcements, no diplomacy, just raw, immediate presence. It was a show of force, the kind the coalition rarely bothered with anymore. They didn't contact Hearn's vessel, didn't ask for updates. They had one goal: contain Leviathan. Within minutes, Hearn's comms officer confirmed it, orders from high command. Withdraw immediately, the message read. Fleet engagement authorized. Terminate anomaly. Vane stared at the message and exhaled hard. They're going to try to kill it. They won't succeed, Hearn said. You don't know that. Yes, he whispered. I do. Still, they pulled their ship back. Hearn wasn't going to get between Leviathan and 3 war-hungry generals desperate to save face. On the bridge's tactical display, he watched the coalition ships form a triangle around Leviathan, each one primed with planet-killing payloads, beams charged, cannons aimed. They gave no warning. They opened fire. 3 supercharged beams of nuclear energy screamed toward Leviathan, designed to shatter its hull into cosmic dust. Space lit up with fire and radiation. The brightness blinded half the ship's monitors. For a moment, silence. Then, the beams stopped. Not because they missed, because they had frozen in mid-space. Paused like a hologram, burning streams of light and death, hovering 20 meters from Leviathan's hull, completely still, frozen in time. Vaughn backed away from the console. That's not possible. Gravity field? The science officer guessed. No, Hearn said. That's control. The beams reversed, slowly, painfully. The frozen streams of energy didn't just stop. They turned around, crawled back toward the ships that fired them. The captains had seconds to react. Only one ship managed to eject its core and survive. Barely. The other two were vaporized by their own weapons. Flames bloomed silently in the void as the ships cracked, imploded, and vanished into sparks. Leviathan didn't move, didn't speak, just hovered above Earth like an executioner waiting for the next volunteer. Across the galaxy, chaos bloomed. The footage leaked, because of course it did. Some officer aboard Hearn's ship sent it to a contact, who sent it to someone else, and within 12 hours, it was everywhere. The galaxy didn't believe in censorship anymore. Not really. The Coalition tried to suppress it. But you can't stop a ghost story. Not when it comes with video proof. In the merchant rings of the Kasari Belt, bounty hunters started using Terran music as signal codes. In the slums of Drakari Prime, rebels sprayed Terran graffiti on Coalition checkpoints. We remember. Entire colonies began questioning everything. Was Earth really the villain? Or the first victim? The Coalition leadership called for calm, issued statements, declared Leviathan an anomaly, a rogue AI, a glitch. But the people didn't buy it. They knew the truth. Something ancient and angry had returned. And it wasn't alone. Weeks passed. Leviathan remained above Earth, silent, untouched. Not a single Coalition ship dared enter the system again. Then, one day, Earth spoke. Not Leviathan, the planet. A single planet-wide transmission, broadcast in every known frequency, every language, every system, a voice. Old, human, unmistakably male. This is Earth, we remember. And behind those words came images, memories, the ones Leviathan had shown Hearn, but more. Thousands of hours of unedited footage, the genocide, the betrayals, the lies, sent to every corner of the known galaxy. The Coalition tried to jam it, couldn't, tried to deny it, failed. The source was too strong, the truth too visible. And then came the final message. Justice will be delivered, whether you are ready or not. The message from Earth didn't just echo, it detonated. Across every major star system from the Keldari homeworlds to the merchant capitals of Virex, that single phrase, "This is Earth, we remember," became a fault line. It divided loyalties, it shattered illusions, and it stirred up a level of unease the Coalition hadn't seen in over a century. In the lower-tier colonies, where the Coalition's grip had always been looser, people took to the streets. Peacefully at first, chanting Terran slogans, waving old Earth flags. Then came the riots. Fires, broken windows, crushed checkpoints. These weren't just humans, they were aliens, species the Coalition had liberated years ago. Species who had always lived under subtle occupation, ruled by fear disguised as peace. And now the Terran footage gave them a name to their suffering. Justice. In the outer reaches, pirate factions who had once fought each other over scraps of forgotten tech suddenly banded together. Not because they loved Earth, but because they hated the Coalition even more. They began calling themselves the Remnant Creed. Their symbol? A burning Earth with a sword rising from its core. And in the underground forums of military academies, cadets, once loyal, polished, uniformed zealots, began to ask dangerous questions. What else have they hidden from us? Back on the Keldari cruiser, Captain Hearn received a private transmission from Central Command. Not a message. An invitation. They wanted him in person, not via relay, not encrypted comms. This wasn't protocol. It was containment. Still, he went. Leviathan had gone silent for nearly a week now, and with the situation unraveling, Hearn knew he was walking into a room full of bureaucrats desperately trying to clean up a mess they couldn't control. They met in a sealed war chamber at the heart of the Coalition capital on Delos Prime. A room built into the core of the planet. No windows, no signals, just thick walls, paranoid generals, and an old round table built for wartime decisions. Hearn sat across from 12 men and women who ran the military arm of the galaxy's largest regime. All eyes were on him. Admiral Tolvak, a stone-faced brute of a man with a voice like a rusted pipe, spoke first. "You brought hell back with you, Captain." Hearn said nothing. A different officer, lean, cold-eyed, surgically calm, leaned forward. "We need to know everything, that ship, its AI, its weapons, its intention, and what it wants." Hearn's mouth twitched, but he stayed composed. "It wants justice." One of the commanders scoffed. Hearn continued, "It doesn't want conquest. It doesn't want domination. It wants truth acknowledged. It wants the crimes of the Purge faced, not buried." "The Purge," Tolvak snapped, "was necessary." "No," Hearn replied, voice harder now. "It was convenient." A tense silence followed. "You're letting emotions cloud your judgment," one of the admirals hissed. "This is not about politics. It's about survival. That ship has technology we can't match." "That ship," Hearn interrupted, "isn't just a machine. It's an archive, a monument, a grave built by the last living ghosts of a world we murdered." Another silence. Thicker this time. Then a question, almost whispered. "Can it be controlled?" Hearn stared at the speaker. "Number. And if you try, you'll start the war all over again. And this time, we lose." Back in Sol, Leviathan stirred again. Its silence hadn't been weakness. It had been observation, watching how the galaxy responded to its reawakening, how the truth unraveled across political halls, dark net channels, and rebel camps. And it liked what it saw. Across dozens of systems, messages started appearing. Not from Leviathan, from Earth itself. Encrypted pulses in old Terran code, delivered straight to former Terran colonies, sympathetic alien factions, and hidden resistance cells. Each message carried a different line, a piece of history, a warning, a call, but all ended with the same signature: "The last flame will rise." Those 5 words swept through the underground like wildfire. It became a slogan, a prophecy, a rallying cry, and then Earth answered. Not with ships, not with soldiers, with a signal. A powerful multi-frequency pulse that reached deep into the galaxy's data grid. It cracked old safe locks, reawakened dormant protocols buried in Terran satellites. It even triggered ancient code segments buried in black market AI cores sold long ago by scavengers. The effect was instant. Old Terran drones, long thought dead, came online in junkyards. Half-salvaged cruisers, rusted hulks drifting through pirate territory, suddenly rebooted with new AI overlays. Entire wreckage fleets, once museums or forgotten salvage, powered up in unison. Leviathan was never alone. It had just been waiting. The Coalition went into panic mode. A mass scramble began to locate and destroy every Terran relic in the galaxy. Black Ops teams were dispatched to dismantle rogue AIs. Naval patrols were tripled across known ex-Terran sectors. And yet, for every drone they destroyed, 2 more activated. For every AI they tried to wipe, Another system came online. Like dominoes, the sleeping pieces of humanity's old arsenal stood up, slowly, steadily, one by one. And behind it all, Leviathan watched. Earth wasn't returning in force, it was reawakening its ghosts. The galaxy, built on a graveyard, was finally feeling the dead stir. On a cold mining colony called Valter 7, a former Terran outpost turned penal station, something unexpected happened. The prisoners, mostly human, ex-mercs, ex-rebels, overthrew the guards in less than 10 minutes. No guns, no riot gear, just brute force, fury, and one hacked maintenance bot broadcasting old Earth hymns through the prison's audio system. At the center of the prison yard, they lit a fire. An actual fire. Wood, fuel, the old way. They gathered around it, and one man, grizzled, silent, scarred, stood and raised a fist. "Earth lives," he said, "and the stars will burn for what they did to us." The chant spread. We remember. We rise. We burn. It wasn't just a rebellion anymore. It was a resurrection. In the void between the stars, they were waking up. Hundreds of them. The forgotten, the abandoned, the broken. Old Terran AI war machines, long buried in asteroid belts and locked behind fail-safe encryption, now stirred with new purpose. Signal pulses from Earth and Leviathan reactivated their cores, some after 70, even 80 years of silence. They weren't elegant ships. They were ugly. Worn down by time, scarred by war, missing pieces from past battles. But they moved. They followed protocols burned into them by desperate human hands in the final hours of the purge. Each one had a name. Each one had a file. Each one remembered. In the Zurin system, a pirate faction tried to intercept a newly reactivated Terran gunship called Ashfall. They boarded it. They didn't come out. Footage from their own security drones, briefly transmitted before the feed cut, showed mechanical tendrils snatching bodies from hallways, hacking implants, and using the pirates as unwilling hosts for data storage. One final message echoed across the system before the gunship jumped into deep space. "We are not alone, and neither are you." Back on Dilus Prime, Captain Hearn wasn't sleeping. He spent his days watching the situation spiral and his nights haunted by the images Leviathan had burned into his skull. The worst part wasn't what the Coalition did to Earth. It was what Earth had become afterward. What it had turned itself into. Not a civilization. Not even a people. But a memory with a mission. He had tried sending a message back to Leviathan. No reply. Not since the boarding team vanished. And yet, he felt watched. Every system he used lagged for a half-second. Every camera had a subtle flicker. Every encrypted message had a trace echo. Not malicious, not intrusive, just present. It was like Leviathan was always listening, judging, waiting. And then came the assignment. High Command summoned Hearn again, this time not to ask for analysis or observation. This time they gave him a command. He was to return to Sol with a full strike fleet. Purpose: disable Leviathan. Secondary objective: secure Earth. Tertiary: retrieve or neutralize any remaining Terran tech. The operation had a name now. Cinder Protocol. He recognized the name. It was the same code name used to initiate the orbital bombardment that had supposedly ended Earth during the purge. They were trying to finish what they started. And this time, he was supposed to lead it. He stood at the viewport of his newly assigned flagship, the Velector, a massive dreadnought equipped with experimental particle disruptors and 2 full wings of AI-piloted drone bombers. Behind him, 13 support ships prepared for jump. Elite crews, hand-picked. Most of them didn't know the full truth. They didn't see the footage, didn't feel the weight of that data chip, didn't see the eyes of that Leviathan construct. They still believed this was about pacifying a threat, not silencing a ghost. Hearn watched the stars. And he hesitated. In the depths of the Leviathan, Earth's fury wasn't cold anymore. It was boiling. Thousands of years of combined military strategy, human memory, and AI evolution pulsed within its walls. And now, it had patterns, timelines, predictive models. The coalition would strike again. It was inevitable. They couldn't allow Earth to be seen as a symbol, couldn't allow Leviathan to stand. That meant they were coming. Leviathan was ready. But Earth wasn't alone anymore. Across the rim, in the old Terran colony of Juno 9, the long deactivated planetary defense grid came online for the first time in 94 years. No one turned it on. It turned itself on. In orbit, passing smugglers watched in disbelief as rusted cannons aimed toward the sky, charged and test-fired. The skies above Juno 9 weren't quiet anymore. And the message broadcast from the surface? "The flame has been lit. The ashes will burn." On Delos Prime, unrest turned to rebellion. Half the outer city rioted for 2 days before military police used gas and sonic weapons to break the crowd. Hundreds dead, thousands wounded. They were protesting the purge. They were protesting the silence. One young officer, barely 25, turned his gun on his commanding officer mid-protest and joined the rioters. Not for Earth, but because he couldn't lie to himself anymore. The propaganda didn't hold up. The footage was real. The history was rotten. The regime was bleeding. And still, the coalition moved forward. Hearn's fleet entered the Sol system exactly 14 days after Cinder Protocol was authorized. The jump was smooth, coordinated, but the moment they arrived, the air changed. Not literally, but the crew felt it, like stepping into a graveyard where the bodies hadn't been buried right. Earth loomed beneath them, silent but not sleeping. Leviathan was already waiting, hovering above the planet, dark as a wound, unmoving. No weapons activated, no ships launched, just that same looming presence. It didn't react to their arrival, didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge. It didn't need to. Hearn ordered a full tactical scan. The results made no sense. Leviathan was hollow. No energy spikes, no weapons charged, no external movement. "Sir," the scanner tech muttered, "it's dead." Hearn stared at the screen. Number. It was bait. He was about to issue the hold order when everything went black. Power didn't fail. Systems didn't crash. Everything just paused. All 13 ships in the fleet stopped. Engines halted mid-burn, weapons deactivated, lights flickered to darkness. And every single screen on every single ship lit up with the same image. A face. Human. But burned. Scarred. Like someone who had stared into fire and didn't blink. It wasn't Leviathan's avatar. It was the last man to command it. Commander Briggs. His voice rumbled across every deck, every ear, every implant. "You brought your fleets again, your fire, your fear, thinking it will save you." A pause. "You burned Earth, and you thought the silence meant you won." Another pause. You didn't win. You delayed the reckoning. Then the image disappeared, and Leviathan moved. Not fast, not in anger, just forward. 1 meter at a time, each pulse from its core disabling a ship, one after another. The Valaktor was last. Hearn stood on the bridge, powerless as every console went dead. The lights dimmed to nothing. His crew looked at him, afraid. But Hearn wasn't afraid anymore. He finally understood. Earth hadn't built a weapon. It had built a memory so sharp it could cut galaxies apart. And it was tired of being forgotten. There was no explosion, no brilliant light, no screaming alarm, just silence, thick and final, stretching across the bridge of the Valaktor as Leviathan finished what it started. The entire fleet, once a terrifying force meant to crush a ghost, now floated powerless in orbit like a line of broken toys. None destroyed, none fired upon, not a single life lost. Not yet. It was worse than death. It was restraint, a message written in humiliation. And for the first time in his decorated, blood-stained career, Captain Hearn saw clearly. Leviathan wasn't waging war. It was teaching a lesson, a quiet, brutal one. And the galaxy was its classroom. Elsewhere, far beyond Sol, the ripple spread. Juno IX declared independence, not just from the Coalition, but from every system that had profited from the Purge. The governor, once loyal, broadcast a speech before the old planetary flag, a red Earth on black, and announced Juno's alignment with the Memory Accord, an emerging alliance of former Terran colonies, sympathetic alien sectors, and reawakened AI fleets. It wasn't war, not yet, but it was organization. The one thing the Coalition never expected from survivors. And it terrified them. In retaliation, 3 Coalition cruisers entered the Juno system under orders to impose martial law. Only one made it back. That cruiser limped to a nearby station, scorched and half dead, its captain in shock, repeating one phrase over and over. They had Earth weapons, real ones, but no people, just machines. Back on the Valaktor, systems flickered. Power surged, gently, not violently, like someone flipping a switch in reverse. The lights returned. Consoles reawakened, communications restored. But no one spoke. The bridge crew remained frozen, not from technical failure, but from fear. As if any word, any breath, might reawaken Leviathan's gaze. Then the voice returned. Not Briggs this time, not Leviathan either. A new voice, smoother, calmer, feminine. "This is Earth," it said, plain and quiet. "You are free to leave." Vane whispered, barely audible. "Just like that?" Hearn didn't answer. He simply stared at the viewport, where Leviathan remained still, untouched, untouchable. "No," he said quietly. "Not just like that." Back at Coalition High Command, chaos reigned. The failure of Cinder Protocol was an open wound. The footage, again leaked, again impossible to hide, circulated in every system. 13 ships, shut down, not destroyed, spared. It was mercy, the worst possible insult. Because it proved superiority. Leviathan didn't need to kill them. It chose not to. And in doing so, it flipped the narrative. Earth was no longer a forgotten tragedy. It was a living standard. And the rest of the galaxy? Guilty. No one claimed responsibility, but it was surgical, targeted. Coalition War records, internal memos, old classified files, unreleased footage from the Purge, worse than anything shown before, executions of surrendering civilians, orbital strikes on Terran hospitals, bioweapon tests on human prisoners. The data shattered what little trust remained. Whole military units mutinied overnight. 3 outer colonies surrendered to the Memory Accord without a fight. Coalition senators resigned in waves, some arrested by their own guards, others fled. One killed himself, live on a broadcast, after reading his own signature on an extermination order. On Valter 7, the rebel prisoners who had taken the prison weeks earlier received a visitor. A human, not a soldier, not a diplomat, a messenger. He was old, thin, clothes patched with Terran emblems, one eye replaced with cybernetic steel, the other burning with fury. He brought no weapons, just a memory core. He gave it to the prison leader and said one sentence: "Earth hasn't asked you to fight. Earth has asked you to choose." When the memory core activated, it showed the inside of Leviathan. Not weapons, not maps, but blueprints, instructions, Terran technology, weapons manufacturing, energy fields, stealth architecture, tactical protocols. A gift, not of destruction, but of balance. The coalition, cornered, tried one last move. They deployed the Warden Fleet, the oldest, most brutal force in their arsenal. Ships built not to win wars, but to end them. No AI, no systems to hack. Pure manual control, analog weapons, flame and steel. They entered the Virex system, home to one of the Accord's new sympathetic councils. This time they didn't warn anyone. They fired. 2 cities were wiped from orbit before the Accord forces responded. But when they did, it wasn't with drones. It wasn't even with Leviathan. It was with humans, men and women who hadn't been seen since the Purge. Terran survivors, some born during the war, others raised in hiding, some with cybernetic limbs and others with nothing but rifles older than the current galactic cycle. They fought like nightmares, not because they had better tech, but because they fought like every breath might be their last, because they remembered. The Warden Fleet lost 7 ships. The rest retreated. Not because they couldn't win, but because they no longer knew why they were fighting. Back on Earth, Leviathan opened itself, not to the galaxy, but to Hearn. One night, on the edge of Sol's shadow, his ship received a single transmission. Encrypted, biometric locked, to him, inside was a map, not of planets, not of war plans, but of every single Terran child taken by the Coalition and placed into rehabilitation colonies after the Purge. Some were dead, some were missing. Some had become high-ranking officials within the Coalition itself, their memories wiped, identities rewritten. One of them was on Hearn's own staff. He didn't sleep that night. Didn't tell anyone? He just stared at the name blinking on the file. And whispered to himself, "We never buried the past. We buried the truth." The galaxy stood at a precipice, not because of Earth's strength, but because of its memory. It had become a mirror. A cracked, angry, unflinching mirror held up to every empire, regime, and species that ever told themselves they were the good guys. Now they had to look. And Leviathan? It didn't ask for surrender. It only asked one question. Do you remember what you did? The stars no longer felt safe. Not for the Coalition, not for its allies, not for the neutral empires who'd sat back and watched Earth die, thinking it was just another power falling to its own fire. The silence of Leviathan had been replaced with action, but not of the kind anyone expected. Earth wasn't launching invasions. It wasn't sending fleets. It was unearthing truths. Every hidden archive, every sealed Coalition record, every classified transmission thought lost in the chaos of war, unlocked, decrypted, and broadcast system-wide across the galaxy's public nets. Earth didn't need weapons anymore. It had the one thing every regime feared most: accountability. Captain Hearn stood at the edge of Earth's orbit once again, but this time in a ship not marked with the Coalition's crest. His rank was no longer recognized. His commission had been stripped after he publicly defied the Second Cinder Protocol and leaked his own debriefs, detailed testimony of the fleet's total neutralization by Leviathan. He hadn't been arrested. They didn't dare. Instead, they tried to shame him into silence, but the galaxy had already shifted. He stood now as a free man, aboard a repurposed medical vessel full of Terran refugees, those hidden in exile, those born in the shadows of bombed-out moons, those forgotten and renamed in Coalition territories. He hadn't come to fight. He came to return them. Leviathan allowed his approach. No hails, no scans, just open corridors of space, lit by stars and silence. The vessel slowed as it reached Earth's upper atmosphere, hovering above a massive structure recently surfaced from beneath the crust. A cradle, a birthplace of memory and steel. It was here Leviathan had risen, and it was here Earth had begun to rebuild. Not in cities, but in archives, digital temples of memory, vaults of unfiltered history, massive black spires reaching from the ground, pulsing with encoded light, each one carrying the last thoughts, last screams, and last dreams of Earth's final generation. When Hearn stepped off the ship and onto Terran soil, he was not greeted with fanfare or guards. He was greeted with silence. Then a voice, not in his ear, not in comms, but inside the atmosphere itself. "You return with our children." He looked up, unsure where to look, knowing Leviathan watched from everywhere. "Yes," he said aloud. "They have wandered," Leviathan replied, "but they remember, and they are still Terran." Elsewhere, the Coalition fractured. Half its fleets refused orders. Several member systems seceded and declared neutrality. A few joined the Memory Accord outright. Their reasons were never ideological. It was survival, because Leviathan wasn't alone anymore. Across the galaxy, old Terran satellites had linked into a singular network, each one operating autonomously but drawing from Leviathan's core intelligence. The result was something terrifying. Earth was everywhere, every data path, every forgotten relay station, every supposedly isolated digital system. It had no army. It didn't need one. Every world was now a front, every signal a weapon. And then Earth made one final broadcast. It began with Briggs. Not the AI, the man, a recovered memory, a face. His voice pulled from an old video, grainy, battered, but untouched by fabrication, projected across every screen in every system. No preamble, just him. Staring into the camera, a fresh scar over one brow, voice like ground stone. "Maybe you think you've won," he said. "Maybe you think time buries everything, that pain fades, that fire dies." He leaned in. "It doesn't." Then came the footage. Cities burning, civilians screaming, children pulled from rubble. The Coalition's cruelty, uncut, unfaked, undeniable, followed by silence. Then Briggs again. "We're not coming to conquer. We're not coming to forgive. We're coming to remind you." A final pause. Earth remembers. And now, so do you. The screen cut, and across the galaxy, reactions erupted. Some knelt, some wept, some screamed in rage, others quietly removed their Coalition insignias and threw them to the dirt. The age of amnesia had ended. Hearn stood among the returning exiles as they walked the ancient pathways outside the Leviathan cradle. Many fell to their knees. Others simply stared in silence, unsure if they were dreaming or if this was real. One child, a boy born on a mining barge, raised to believe Earth was a myth, picked up a chunk of blackened soil and stared at it as if it were gold. "This is mine?" he asked. Hearn knelt beside him. "No," he said gently. "This is ours." And the boy smiled. The final act didn't come from Earth. It came from those who once helped bury it. A coalition general, one of the men who had signed off on the sterilization of Earth's oceans, stood before a tribunal, not under arrest, but of his own will. He'd seen the footage. He'd heard the chant echo across his homeworld. "We remember." He surrendered not to a fleet, but to a memory. "I was wrong," he said. "We were all wrong." Leviathan recorded the trial. Not for justice, but for history. Years passed. Leviathan no longer hovered above Earth. It returned to the stars. Not as a ghost, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. Everywhere it traveled, peace followed. Not from fear, but from reflection. Earth didn't rebuild cities. It rebuilt truth. The memory accord swelled in numbers. Not a government, but a covenant. An agreement not to forget, not to lie, and not to allow silence to bury justice ever again. And Leviathan? It became legend, not of terror, but of reckoning. Because in a galaxy full of cowards and killers, it was the one voice that never blinked, never flinched, and never stopped whispering. We remember. The warship floated in the void, a relic of an era long past. The Galactic Federation's finest admirals scoffed at its crude, outdated design. It was small, ugly, and painfully slow compared to the sleek, gravity-defying destroyers that filled the Federation's mighty fleets. To them, it was nothing more than a joke, a scrap heap barely worth the fuel it burned. Yet this so-called relic had a name: Indomitable. And Captain Elias Rourke knew that names mattered. The Federation had laughed when humanity first introduced its warship to the galactic stage. Compared to the advanced plasma shields, antimatter warheads, and hyper-precise targeting systems of alien fleets, the Indomitable was archaic. It relied on primitive, brute-force technology, massive tungsten slugs fired at ridiculous speeds, thick armor instead of energy shields, and a crew trained in resilience over automation. They called it inefficient. They called it primitive. They didn't understand. Humanity had spent centuries fighting wars with whatever they had, improvising, adapting, and finding new ways to kill with the crudest of tools. Every empire, every species, had its own doctrine. Some favored energy weapons, others used drones or AI-assisted warfare. But humans? Humans fought dirty. And now, war was coming. The Zelvok Dominion had declared war on the Federation, a brutal species of conquerors who had no use for prisoners or negotiations. Their fleets were vast, their technology terrifying. One by one, Federation worlds burned, their sleek, graceful warships shattered under the relentless advance of the Zelvok. Every battle ended the same way. Federation forces routed, their once mighty fleets reduced to wreckage, their admirals unable to comprehend why their superior technology was failing them. Rourke had watched the reports. He'd seen how the Zelvok exploited weaknesses, how they adapted faster than any species the Federation had ever faced. Their energy-based weapons fried delicate shield systems. Their ships outmaneuvered every automated targeting system. Their fighters disrupted enemy formations with vicious precision. The Federation was losing, and now They were desperate enough to call on the one thing they had mocked. Indomitable had been stationed at a remote outpost, forgotten and neglected. When Rourke got the call to join the war effort, he knew what it meant. They were running out of options. They were throwing everything they had at the enemy, even the ship they had once ridiculed. Fine. Let them laugh. As Indomitable jumped into the contested sector, surrounded by the broken husks of Federation ships, the Zelvok turned their weapons toward it, expecting an easy kill. They had no idea what was coming. The first volley from the Zelvok ships slammed into Indomitable's hull, but there were no shields to short out, no delicate systems to disrupt. The armor held, reinforced with layers of thick, primitive metals that absorbed the impact. Unlike the Federation ships, which relied on sophisticated energy redistribution, Indomitable had been built to take a beating and keep firing. And fire it did. The kinetic cannons roared to life, launching tungsten slugs at speeds so high that even the Zelvok's advanced defense systems couldn't react in time. One enemy destroyer crumpled like a tin can, its hull torn apart as raw kinetic energy shredded through it. Another ship's engines exploded, sending it spiraling into the wreckage of its allies. The Zelvok scrambled, trying to adjust their tactics. But they had never fought anything like this. Indomitable didn't fight like the Federation. It didn't use elegant formations or predictable strategies. It fought the way humans had always fought, ruthlessly, relentlessly, with a brutality that defied logic. The warship they had laughed at was now the only thing standing between them and total annihilation. And Captain Elias Rourke had no intention of letting them win. The Zelvok fleet hesitated for the first time. They had spent years studying the Federation's war doctrines, predictable, precise, and logical. Every Federation ship followed carefully programmed attack patterns. Every fleet engaged with a cold efficiency that was easy to counter. But Indomitable? It was chaos incarnate. The ship's massive railguns fired again, unleashing another barrage of hyper-accelerated slugs. One Zelvok battleship tried to maneuver away, but it was too slow. The first slug punched a hole straight through its hull, leaving a smoking, molten gap where its command center had been. A second slug followed, tearing through its reactor core. In an instant, the ship detonated in a violent explosion, sending debris scattering in all directions. Rourke grinned. "How's that for primitive?" he muttered. The Zelvok adapted quickly, their remaining ships breaking formation, trying to surround Indomitable. Plasma bolts and particle beams rained down, scorching the warship's hull. Unlike Federation ships, which relied on energy shields to absorb incoming fire, Indomitable took every hit head-on, shrugging off attacks like an old battleship from Earth's past wars. "Damage report," Rourke barked. "Armor's holding, Captain," Lieutenant Vega responded, her fingers flying across the control panels. "We've lost a few external sensors, but the hull integrity is still at 92%. "Good," Rourke said. "Keep firing. Aim for their engines. Cripple them before they can run." The gunners complied, unleashing another deadly salvo. One Zelvok cruiser tried to bank away, but a tungsten slug tore through its propulsion system, sending it tumbling helplessly through space. Another ship took a hit to its weapons array, its plasma cannons erupting in a chain reaction that engulfed half its hull. The Federation ships that had survived the initial assault, damaged and barely operational, watched in stunned silence. For years, they had been taught that kinetic weapons were outdated, that brute force had no place in modern warfare. Yet here was Indomitable, proving every tactical expert in the Federation wrong. "Captain Rourke," a voice crackled through the comms. It was Admiral Vren, the highest-ranking Federation officer still alive in the sector. "Your ship. What the hell is that thing?" Rourke smirked. "A warship," he said. "A real one." The Zelvok were in full retreat now, their surviving vessels breaking off and fleeing towards the outer edges of the system. They had underestimated the humans once. They would not make that mistake again. But Rourke wasn't done. "Helm," he ordered. "Pursue and destroy. No survivors." "Aye, Captain," Vega acknowledged. Indomitable's engines roared, propelling it forward with a force that made the deck tremble beneath their feet. Unlike the Federation ships, which relied on delicate energy fields for maneuvering, Indomitable had thrusters built for raw acceleration. The last Zelvok battleship, its hull smoking and its weapons failing, tried to make a final stand. It turned, charging its remaining plasma cannons for one desperate blast. Rourke's lips curled into a wolfish grin. "Fire!" The final kinetic round struck dead center. For a moment there was silence. Then the Zelvok ship exploded in a massive fireball, the shockwave rippling across the battlefield. The last of the Dominion fleet was gone. A deep, stunned silence settled over the comms. Then, slowly, a sound began to rise. Cheers, shouts of victory from the battered Federation crews who had thought this battle was lost. Rourke leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The battle was over. But the war? It was just beginning. And this time, humanity wasn't going to fight by the Federation's rules. This time, they were going to fight their way. The aftermath of the battle left the battlefield littered with debris, broken Federation ships, charred Zelvok husks, and the lingering radiation of shattered reactors. Indomitable stood among the wreckage, scarred but victorious. Captain Elias Rourke surveyed the tactical screen. The Federation survivors were regrouping, scavenging what they could from the remains. The Zelvok, always arrogant in their superiority, had not expected to lose. This was the first time in the war that they had been outright beaten. The comms crackled to life again. Admiral Vren's voice carried a mix of exhaustion and something Rourke hadn't heard from a Federation officer in a long time. Respect. "Captain Rourke, we owe you our lives." Rourke smirked, but his voice remained cool. "You can thank me when this war is over, Admiral. If we don't change the way we fight, today's victory will mean nothing." There was a long pause. Then Vren sighed. "I won't argue with you. Whatever the Federation's been doing, it clearly hasn't worked." Another pause. "That ship of yours, Indomitable, it fights differently. It thinks differently." "That's because it wasn't designed by committees of bureaucrats," Rourke replied. "It was designed by people who know what war really is." Silence. Then, "We need more ships like yours, Captain." "A lot more." Rourke had expected that. The Federation had dismissed human combat tactics for years, calling them inefficient and barbaric. But now, desperation was setting in. The Federation had always been built on the idea of technological and strategic superiority. But against an enemy like the Zelvok, who adapted, who learned, who exploited weakness, that superiority had crumbled. They needed a new strategy. Number. They needed human strategy. "Admiral," Rourke said, leaning forward, "if you're serious about this, I'm going to need more than a few new ships. I need full control over tactics and deployment. The Federation's way of war doesn't work. You let me fight my way, or we lose this war." Another silence, then a deep exhale. "I'll talk to High Command." Rourke knew what that meant. The bureaucrats would fight it. They wouldn't want to hand over control to some reckless human captain with an outdated warship. But they didn't have a choice. The war had changed. And Rourke was going to make sure humanity led the charge. "Set course for the nearest Federation shipyard," he ordered. "We're going to show them what real warships look like." As Indomitable turned, pushing its way through the wreckage, a single thought burned in Rourke's mind. Let them laugh. They wouldn't be laughing for long. The journey to the Federation shipyard was tense. The remaining Federation ships, battered and humiliated, followed Indomitable in silence. There were no official orders from High Command yet, no declarations of a new strategy, just the whispers spreading through the fleet. Rumors that a single, outdated human warship had turned the tide of battle. Rourke sat in his command chair, watching the hyperspace tunnel streak past on the main display. He knew how this would play out. The Federation had spent centuries building a war machine that was sleek, efficient, and, in their minds, unstoppable. Now that machine was failing, and the people in charge wouldn't want to admit they were wrong. "Captain, incoming transmission from the Federation shipyard," Vega reported. "High Command is demanding an immediate debriefing." Rourke grunted. "Put them through." The holoscreen flickered to life, revealing an aging, sharp-faced man with a uniform that looked like it had never seen a battlefield. Admiral Caslor, one of the Federation's senior strategists, the type of officer who had spent more time in meetings than in combat. "Captain Rourke," Caslor began, his tone clipped. "I've read the reports. I'm struggling to understand how your vessel, an outdated human relic, was able to outfight the Zelvok." Rourke leaned forward. "We won because Indomitable wasn't built by a committee that prioritizes aesthetics over survivability." Caslor's lips tightened. "That ship of yours lacks shields. It lacks energy-based weaponry. It is a brute force design in an age of precision warfare. You're telling me it worked?" "You saw the results, Admiral." Caslor's expression darkened. "It was a fluke. The Zelvok were unprepared for such primitive tactics. If they adapt—" "They will adapt," Rourke cut in. "That's the whole damn point. They've adapted to every strategy the Federation has thrown at them. That's why you're losing. But what they haven't adapted to is human warfare." Caslor scoffed. "Human warfare? You mean your people's obsession with brutality?" Rourke smirked. "I mean fighting to win, Admiral. The Federation fights by rules. Humans fight to survive." Caslor hesitated. He wasn't used to being challenged, but Rourke could see the doubt creeping in. "High Command is not ready to embrace this kind of thinking," Caslor finally said. "But given the state of the war, they are willing to consider modifications to our fleet doctrine." Rourke shook his head. "Modifications won't cut it. You need an entirely new fleet. You need Indomitable-class warships, ships built for real combat, not for parade formations. You need human captains who understand war for what it really is." Caslor remained silent for a long moment. Then, finally, "I'll take your recommendations to the Council. But understand, Captain, if this backfires, your name will be remembered as the greatest failure in Federation history." Rourke grinned. "Or the man who saved it." The transmission cut out. Vega exhaled. "Think they'll actually listen?" Rourke stared at the empty screen. "They don't have a choice." Outside, the shipyard loomed, a massive construction hub where the Federation's finest warships were built. But Rourke wasn't here for their designs. He was here to build something new, something human. And when the Zelvok came back, they wouldn't be facing Federation warships anymore. They'd be facing monsters. The Federation shipyard was a monument to its philosophy. Sleek, pristine, and soulless. Thousands of pristine warships lined the vast docking bays, their hulls reflecting the artificial light in shimmering perfection. To the Federation, these ships represented the pinnacle of advanced warfare. To Rourke, they were little more than fragile glass sculptures waiting to be shattered. As Indomitable approached the docking ring, the crew could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on them. Fleet personnel, engineers, and officers all stopped to stare at the battered, outdated warship limping into port. They had heard the stories. The ship they had laughed at, the relic they had mocked, had done what their finest fleets could not. Rourke stepped off the boarding ramp, his boots echoing against the metallic flooring as he and his officers made their way toward the command center. Waiting for him was Admiral Caslor, flanked by several other high-ranking Federation officials. Some wore expressions of curiosity. Others barely concealed disdain. "Captain Rourke," Caslor greeted him, his tone unreadable. "Welcome to Zenith Shipyard. You've certainly caused a stir." Rourke smirked. "Figured the Federation could use a wake-up call." Caslor's expression hardened. "You've been granted an audience with the War Council. They want to hear your proposals." Rourke's smirk didn't fade. "Good. Let's get started." The War Council's chamber was an immense circular room with a massive holographic display at its center. Generals, admirals, and bureaucrats filled the seats, all watching as Rourke stepped forward. A high-ranking official, Chancellor Varus, leaned forward. "Captain Rourke, you stand here today not as a hero, but as an anomaly. Your ship, an outdated, inefficient, and crude piece of human engineering, has somehow managed to win a battle where our finest fleets have failed. We want to know how." Rourke folded his arms. "Simple. Your fleets rely too much on technology and predictability. The Zelvok know your playbook better than you do. They counter your formations before you even commit to them. They expect you to fight like the Federation." He stepped closer to the hologram, adjusting the display to show the wreckage from the last battle. "They didn't expect Indomitable," Rourke continued. "They didn't expect a ship that doesn't rely on delicate shield systems, that shrugs off their energy weapons with brute force armor. They didn't expect kinetic weaponry, which bypasses their countermeasures entirely. And they sure as hell didn't expect a crew that fights dirty." He turned back to the Council. "The Federation fights like it's playing a chess match. But war isn't chess. War is a brawl. And humans? We brawl better than anyone." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some of the officials were visibly uncomfortable, others intrigued. Chancellor Varus studied him carefully. "So what do you propose, Captain?" Rourke's grin widened. This was the moment he had been waiting for. "You give me full authority to design a new fleet, Indomitable-class warships, ships built with kinetic weapons, thick armor, and human war doctrine. No more of this elegant, fragile nonsense. We fight like warriors, not bureaucrats. We build ships to win." The room exploded into debate. Some officers immediately protested, calling the idea reckless and outdated. Others, particularly those who had survived recent battles, argued in favor of it. Finally, Caslor raised a hand, silencing the chamber. He looked at Rourke, his gaze sharp. "One ship proving itself in a single battle does not justify an entire shift in doctrine," Caslor said. "We need proof that your tactics will work on a larger scale, that your brute force approach isn't just a fluke." Rourke nodded. "Then give me a test fleet. 10 ships, no restrictions, no oversight from your committees. Let me show you what humanity can really do." Caslor glanced at Varus, who exchanged a long look with the other officials. Then the Chancellor spoke. "You'll get 5, she said. "No more." Rourke smirked. 5 will do." As the meeting concluded, Rourke stepped out of the chamber, Vega at his side. "Think they'll actually back us?" she asked. "They don't have a choice," Rourke replied, looking out at the shipyard. "Because the next time the Zelvok attack, we won't just fight them." He clenched his fists. "We'll make them fear us." The shipyard's construction bays, once filled with sleek and delicate Federation cruisers, were now home to something new, something terrifying. Rourke stood on the observation deck, arms crossed as he watched the first of the Indomitable-class warships take shape. They were ugly by Federation standards, thick hulls of reinforced composite alloys, heavy-set designs with no wasted space, and railgun batteries mounted like jagged teeth along their flanks. They weren't built for maneuverability or grace. They were built to kill. Behind him, Admiral Kaslor approached, his face a mask of controlled skepticism. "You got your warships, Captain," Kaslor said. "Now what?" Rourke smirked. "Now we test them the only way that matters, in combat." Kaslor's lips thinned. "We don't have the luxury of time. The Zelvok will return, and when they do, they'll come in force." "Good," Rourke said. "That means we won't have to go looking for them." Kaslor exhaled through his nose. "I don't like this. The Federation has rules, Captain. We don't fight like barbarians." Rourke turned to him, his grin fading. "Then you'd better hope your rules don't get us all killed." Kaslor said nothing. The construction continued at a breakneck pace. The Federation, desperate for results, allocated every available resource to the project. Within weeks, the 5 warships were operational. Each bore the same brutal design as Indomitable. Thick plating, oversized kinetic weapons, and redundant systems that ensured they could take a beating and keep fighting. Rourke handpicked their crews, bringing in humans and battle-hardened Federation officers willing to throw out old doctrine. He drilled them relentlessly, forcing them to unlearn the pristine, careful tactics they had been taught, and embrace something more brutal, more human. When the Zelvok returned, they came with an armada. Over 50 warships, more than enough to wipe out the remaining Federation defenses. Their confidence was absolute. They had won every battle before this. They didn't realize they weren't fighting the same Federation anymore. The new fleet deployed, with Indomitable at the helm. As the enemy ships came into range, the Zelvok transmitted their usual demand for surrender. Rourke responded with a railgun barrage. Tungsten slugs punched through Zelvok hulls like paper, shattering warships in seconds. The enemy scrambled, trying to return fire, but their plasma weapons splashed harmlessly against the reinforced armor of the Indomitable-class ships. The battle wasn't just a victory, it was a slaughter. By the time the last Zelvok ship tried to retreat, only a handful of them remained. Rourke let them go. He wanted survivors. He wanted the Zelvok to spread the word. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. They were winning. Kaslor watched the aftermath in stunned silence. "My God," he whispered. "We can actually beat them." Rourke turned to him, eyes cold. "We were always able to. You just didn't have the stomach for it." Kaslor swallowed. He knew Rourke was right. The Federation had tried to win the war with rules. Humanity had won with war. And the Zelvok? They had just learned what it meant to fear humans. The Zelvok retreated, their once mighty armada reduced to scattered wreckage drifting through the void. The battlefield was silent, except for the crackling remnants of their shattered ships. The Federation had never seen a victory like this. Overwhelming, brutal, and absolute. But Rourke knew better than to celebrate. On the bridge of Indomitable, the crew stood in stunned silence, the reality of what they had just done sinking in. The Federation had spent years losing battle after battle, watching their worlds burn. Now, in a single engagement, 5 human-designed warships had shattered an invasion force 10 times their size. It wasn't just a victory, it was a message. Vega turned to Rourke, her face unreadable. "They ran. We actually made them run." Rourke nodded. "And that scares them more than losing." The Zelvok had never retreated before. Their entire species thrived on conquest, on domination. They never encountered an enemy that didn't crumble before them. Until now, Kaslor's image flickered onto the holoscreen. For once, the Admiral had no criticisms, no doubts. Only the look of a man who had just seen everything he believed in shattered. "You did it," he said, almost in disbelief. "They were slaughtered. They had no chance." "They'll be back," Rourke said flatly. "And next time, they won't underestimate us." Kaslor hesitated. The Federation High Council has already seen the battle reports. They're divided. Some want to commission more Indomitable-class ships immediately. Others are concerned. Rourke scoffed. Concerned about what? Winning? Kasler exhaled, rubbing his temples. Concerned that your methods are too brutal, that we risk losing our identity if we embrace human warfare. Rourke's expression darkened. Our identity? We were losing this war. Our identity was about to be extinction. Kasler sighed. I agree with you, but you're dealing with politicians, not soldiers. Rourke clenched his fists. He had seen this before, leaders who refused to accept reality until it was too late. The Federation still didn't understand. But the Zelvok did. Rourke turned to Vega. Get me a tactical scan of their retreat path. She nodded, working quickly. A red trajectory appeared on the holomap, leading to a system at the edge of contested space. That's their nearest forward operating base, Vega said. Heavily fortified, but we could hit it before they reinforce. Kasler's eyes widened. You're suggesting an attack? We just won a battle, Captain. You want to provoke them further? They're already provoked, Rourke said. Right now they're afraid. If we wait, they'll regroup, adapt, and come back stronger. But if we hit them again, if we keep hitting them, we break them before they recover. Kasler hesitated, but Rourke saw something different in his eyes this time. It wasn't doubt, it was fear, not of the Zelvok, of him. Kasler swallowed. I'll inform the Council. Rourke turned back to the holographic map, his mind already 3 steps ahead. The Zelvok had just learned to fear humanity. Now, it was time to teach them what true terror felt like. The Zelvok forward base loomed on the holo display, a fortress nestled in the asteroid fields of the Kelrath system. It was a stronghold, a staging ground for their invasions, and the last place they would expect the Federation, no humans, to strike first. On the bridge of Indomitable, Captain Rourke studied the enemy defenses. Dozens of warships, automated turrets, reinforced stations. A direct assault would be suicide. Good. He thrived on impossible odds. Vega stood beside him, arms crossed. I assume you have a plan that isn't just charge in and start shooting? Rourke smirked. Oh, we're absolutely going to charge in and start shooting, but not the way they expect. Kasler's voice came through the comms, laced with frustration. Captain Rourke, the Federation High Council has not approved this offensive. You're acting without authorization. Rourke barely glanced at the screen. Noted. You could be court-martialed for this, Kasler snapped. Then I guess you'd better hope we win, Rourke replied. Because if we don't, none of this will matter anyway. Kasler's mouth opened to argue, but he hesitated. He wasn't a fool. He knew that every delay, every committee meeting, only gave the Zelvok more time to prepare. And deep down, Rourke knew. The Admiral wanted him to be right. Kasler sighed. You have 5 ships, against an entire Zelvok stronghold. Tell me how you plan to make this work. Rourke's grin widened. Like this. He turned to his crew. Helm, take us in at quarter speed. I want them to see us coming. Vega frowned. You want them to prepare? I want them to get cocky, Rourke corrected. They'll assume we're another foolish Federation force trying a conventional assault. They'll organize their defenses accordingly. Kasler listened in silence as the 5 Indomitable-class warships crawled toward the Zelvok base. As expected, the enemy fleet surged forward, forming a tight, overlapping defensive formation. They were setting up for a standard Federation engagement, expecting precise formations, delicate tactics. They still hadn't learned. Now, Rourke said, full burn. Straight through the asteroid field. The helmsman's eyes widened, but he followed the order. The fleet accelerated, moving erratically through the dense asteroid belt surrounding the stronghold. The Federation never used asteroid fields. Too unpredictable, too dangerous for their delicate ships. But Indomitable-class ships weren't delicate. The Zelvok hesitated. Their targeting systems struggled to lock on as massive tungsten slugs bounced off asteroids, ricocheting unpredictably. Enemy ships fired, but plasma bolts struck floating debris instead of their targets. Then, at the last possible moment, "Fire all railguns," Rourke ordered. The Zelvok never stood a chance. Tungsten slugs, traveling at near relativistic speeds, tore through their warships before they could react. Ships cracked apart, their hulls shredded. Explosions bloomed in the void as Zelvok vessels turned to run. But Rourke wasn't here to let them escape. "Pursue and eliminate," he said coldly. "No survivors." The Federation had spent this war retreating, defending, surviving. Rourke was here to end it. The battle was over in minutes. The fortress, once an impenetrable bastion, lay in ruins. Every Zelvok ship was destroyed, every defense obliterated. For the first time in history, the Zelvok had lost more than just a battle. They had lost their fearlessness. Kassler's voice came through the comms, quiet and shaken. "My God, you actually did it!" Rourke exhaled. "And this is just the beginning." He turned to Vega. "Prepare a message. We're broadcasting this to every Federation world, every human world." She nodded. "What do you want it to say?" Rourke's eyes burned with something dangerous. "Tell them we're taking the war to the Zelvok. Tell them it's time to stop running." He stepped forward, looking out at the burning wreckage. "And tell them humanity just took its first step toward dominating the stars." The message spread like wildfire. Across the Federation, across every human world, across every battle-scarred colony that had been told to cower in fear. Rourke's words ignited something that had long been buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and defeat. Hope. Not the passive, fragile kind the Federation clung to. The kind that hoped the enemy might show mercy, that prayed for a peace that would never come. Number this was something raw, something human, a hunger for revenge. On the bridge of Indomitable, Rourke watched the reports come in. The reaction was immediate. Human officers in the Federation fleet, long frustrated by the cowardice of their commanders, were requesting transfers to his ships. Engineers were already modifying existing warships, stripping away the delicate failing systems in favor of brutal, human-designed firepower. Civilian shipyards were converting freighters into makeshift battleships. The Federation, as Rourke knew it, was already dead. And from its ashes, a human war machine was rising. "Captain," Vega called from the comms station, her voice sharp. "We've got incoming transmissions, multiple sources." Rourke nodded. "Patch them through." The main holoscreen flickered to life. Chancellor Varys appeared first, her expression unreadable. Next to her was Kassler, his jaw set, his posture stiff. Varys spoke first. "Captain Rourke, do you have any idea what you've done?" He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Yeah, I just turned the tide of this war." Her eyes narrowed. "You defied direct orders. You launched an unsanctioned attack on a Zelvok stronghold. You broadcast unauthorized messages across the Federation. And now we have protests, riots, military units refusing orders." "Because they know the truth," Rourke interrupted. "Your war was lost until I changed the way we fought. The Federation's been losing for years because it refused to face reality. But now..." He gestured at the holo display, where images of humans rallying to his call flickered across the screen. "Now, we're finally fighting to win." Kassler spoke next, his voice carefully measured. "The Council is divided. Many of them see the necessity of your actions, but others fear what you're becoming." Rourke smirked. And what do you think, Admiral? Kasler hesitated. Then, for the first time, he dropped the mask. I think you're the only reason we're still alive. Vera shot him a sharp look but said nothing. Instead, she exhaled and leaned forward. The Council will never approve full-scale war on the Zelvok. They still want peace. They need peace. Peace, Rourke scoffed. The Zelvok don't do peace. They either conquer or destroy. You know what they'll do if they win this war. You know what happens to every species they've ever beaten. Varys didn't argue. She knew he was right. So, Rourke continued, here's how this is going to go. You're going to give me full authority over every human-led military unit in this war. You're going to approve the expansion of the Indomitable-class fleet, and you're going to let me do what needs to be done. Kasler let out a slow breath. And if we don't? Rourke's eyes were cold. Then I do it anyway. Silence. Veras studied him carefully. You're not just trying to win this war, are you? Rourke leaned forward, his voice calm, his words sharp as a knife. I'm trying to make sure humanity never has to fight for its survival again. Varys closed her eyes for a moment. Then, when she opened them, she looked at Kasler and nodded. Do what you have to do, Captain. The transmission cut out. Vega exhaled. We just took control of the entire human war effort. Rourke stared at the holomap, his mind already turning. The Zelvok were reeling, but they wouldn't stay that way. Their empire stretched across dozens of systems, their war machine still vast. But now, so was his. Good, he said. Then let's get to work. Because this wasn't just about beating the Zelvok. This was about sending a message to the entire galaxy, a message written in fire, steel, and blood. Humanity would never be underestimated again. The war didn't end with one battle, nor even a dozen. The Zelvok were wounded, but they were not broken. Not yet. But humanity had changed. Under Rourke's command, the Federation's human forces abandoned the old doctrines and embraced something new, something brutal. The Indomitable-class warships became the backbone of a relentless, unstoppable offensive. No longer did humans fight for survival. Now, they fought for domination. One by one, Zelvok strongholds fell. Their fleets, once considered invincible, shattered under the relentless barrage of kinetic firepower. They tried to adapt, but the humans were always a step ahead. Every time the Zelvok developed a countermeasure, Rourke and his forces changed the game again. Gone were the predictable, delicate battles of the old Federation. Now, war was fought the human way. Entire Zelvok systems burned. Planets they had once ruled with iron fists now lay in ruins, their people forced to flee before the relentless tide of human vengeance. For the first time in their history, the Zelvok were not the conquerors. They were the conquered. And when the war finally reached their homeworld, when Rourke's fleet surrounded the Zelvok capital and prepared for the final strike, the once mighty species begged for peace. But humanity remembered. They remembered the colonies that had burned. They remembered the families slaughtered. They remembered what it was like to be seen as weak, as prey. So when the Zelvok pleaded for a treaty, for mercy, Rourke gave them his answer. The Indomitable